Life is a film, a stage. Life is a dream. The actor's role is greater than the sum of his parts.
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm J.J. Weinberg, and this is my perspective.
Greetings and salutations. My name is J.J. Weinberg. I am an artist, an alchemist, an author, a musician, and I am none of these things. I say this at the beginning of every episode. Why? Because there's a danger in mistaking the image of yourself for yourself. We'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to thank the underwriters for this program, Voga, Barnes, and Denny. I want to thank everybody at WVLP for making this show possible. There's so much to talk about. Last week, I started talking about the AI character created in a world where it has some sort of sentient agency. We'll talk about that. But in the meantime, I've been getting messages, over inundated with messages about the win for public media. I'm getting these messages, of course, because you may or may not know, but I have not an obsession, but an admiration of Bob Ross, of Mr. Rogers, of Mark Kistler. You probably don't know that last name. Mark Kistler taught me in many ways how to draw. These are all public media figures who I say are the moral compass and have been the moral compass for generations. And in 2014, I started this Bob Ross project, a parody project that moved from parody to purpose. It's called Happy Little Hairdos. And early in 2015, one of the first things that I drew on this project, the idea is, of course, we all know Bob because of his fro, but what would he look like with cornrows or a mohawk, all these different hairstyles? And one of the first things that I drew on him, it was late 2015, was a red hat, a red baseball hat that said, "Make America Paint Again." It was about the tone, not the politics, not left or right, but the tone of Bob Ross versus what I saw in the tone of Donald Trump. And that was the question that I was trying to pose with that illustration. Well, fast forward 10 years, and the line was drawn in the sand. Last year, public media was defunded. If you look back into the history of public media, you can see Fred Rogers testifying in Congress. We wouldn't even know Sesame Street, Bob Ross, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, were it not for Fred Rogers fighting this same exact lack of vision from people in Congress and Senate for what public media promised to be. So we have to thank Fred Rogers for that. Last year, after they defunded public media, I started organizing Bob mobs. I first protested by myself, dressed up as Bob in, they call it cosplay, but I call it Ross play, in front of Trump Tower on the 4th of July. It was the 30-year anniversary of Bob passing. So after that protest, I started organizing where more people would come dressed up as Bob, and it was all leading up to October 29th, which is Bob's birthday, where we protested in Washington, D.C., at the National Monument. I gave a speech dressed up as Bob Ross in the same place that Dr. King delivered his I Have a Dream speech. We organized the Million Bob March, and we're doing it again this year. I'm just touching on this now because I have to go back. If you listen to the last episode, we've got too much to talk about with the actor and the avatar and the dream and this Val Kilmer project that I worked on for about 3 years of my life. But I just want to touch on this real quickly because everything moves so fast, the news cycles. So the headlines were hitting a couple of days ago, earlier this week, and it was a federal judge ruled that President Donald Trump's order to end federal funding for NPR and PBS is unconstitutional. Surprise, he can't do that. It's First Amendment. This is everything that I was jumping up and down about, dressed up as Bob Ross last year when we were doing the Bob Mobs, when we were baptizing statues in Chicago. If you want to check out some of this stuff, you can go on happylittlehairdos.com/millionbobmarch. I'd love for you to register because we're doing it this year. It's going to be something that I build towards, but you can also see some of the pictures and videos like on my Instagram at JJ Weinberg. If you're not following me there, I'd appreciate it if you go and check that out. But so people are sending me like, oh, yeehaw, this is a victory. We won. And it's just a reflection of how disconnected we are. I mean, when I was on PBS, we did a video interview. I was dressed up in full Bob Ross regalia, and we talked about what was happening. And what was happening is that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, who dispenses the money to local PBS and NPR stations throughout the United States, they're the ones that handle the money to dispense to the stations that need it the most. It was being defunded actively. So the original decision to cut funding was done in Congress. It was the result of unconscionable conduct coupled with this cult of personality. As Trump holds sway over the majority of his punch-drunk, hypnotized party, and again, I say the majority, it's not everyone, but his quote-unquote fake news indictments and tantrums, there's something that we should expect from anyone who gaslights and tries to get away with constant lies. A truth-telling press is always going to be painted as quote-unquote biased by a liar because facts are framed as hostile to the cult of personality. So when Trump says that media should be quote-unquote fair to him, what he often means is that it should be less willing to say true things that make him look bad. That's not fairness. That's obedience. That is an assault on free speech, an assault on freedom of the press. But Trump's professional wrestling promos have been seductive to Congress because those that are next in line, they love the idea of not being held accountable by public media. And if all media is privately owned, then we're just going to continue the downward spiral of our current yellow press on steroids of social media fueled internet economics. At best, that's what's going to happen. At worst, we're faced with the quote unquote truth and so-called alternative facts being controlled by the highest bidder. Money determines what will be called facts. A version of mini-true that even George Orwell didn't see coming. So the fact remains, Congress is who actually cut the funding. Last year, already done, 214 Republicans. We have to make note that there were 4 Republicans who didn't vote for this to happen. And we should applaud that. Because it's not left versus right. It's, again, the tone of Donald Trump versus the tone of Bob Ross. It's Mr. Rogers, won't you be my neighbor versus ICE's show me your papers. But the 214 Republicans, they voted to cut funds, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is being destroyed. The damage is already done. Now, of course, we can hope that no future administration is so malevolent, bottom of the barrel, and psychotic enough to come after Bob Ross, Mr. Rogers, and Sesame Street. But that doesn't make this a victory. It's lip service after destruction. It's like somebody demolishing your house and then telling you to celebrate because maybe one day you can rebuild it, knowing full well that rebuilding always costs more than protecting what was already there. And this is why we can't keep falling for the Orwellian doublespeak and political theater. We need to continue to join together around the ideal of free speech, the ideal of free press, the freedom of assembly. It's why I've been saying since 2015 that we need to make America paint again. So I hope you'll join us as Bob Mobs start bubbling up here, leading up to the second annual Million Bob March this October 29th. I'll have more announcements coming soon. I just wanted to get to that before I fold back into filling in some crazy magic from the last episode. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it, you probably should before you get any further into this one. You can find all of the past episodes on jjweinberg.com/perspective. That'll take you to, some of my writing, and it'll take you to links for my YouTube page where you can find these podcasts. I am eventually going to start hosting these on more podcasting platforms besides just YouTube, but that's where all the episodes are for right now. So let's get into this Val Kilmer, I'm Your Huckleberry, Finn. So it was sometime in February I had this idea, this notion of an AI character being built from the inside of a creator's head. Author, J.R. Tolkien creates Frodo. He lives in the books. We don't see him. But then, years later, we see some animation versions. We see some illustrated versions of Frodo. And then, of course, fast forward to the Peter Jackson films, and now to generations, Elijah Wood is Frodo, right? And in this previous episode, I talked about how the actor's role, the finest actors and actresses, they disappear. It's not about seeing, there's said actor. It's about seeing the character. And so this notion that in the near future, there will be AI characters created that don't have an actor, it's fascinating. I'm not saying that I want to get rid of acting. Acting as an art form will never go away, but it's changed. Acting has changed over the years, to be sure. And it's just going to go through another metamorphosis. But it was wild that I had that thought. And then again, if you rewind and you go to the parts of this episode, I talked about having a podcast in 2020 where I was talking about the future and the near future where there would be a cube. I'm just calling it a cube, but basically it's a database that you can license if you're a filmmaker. And this is a near future idea. Sounds kind of sci-fi, but now it's like looking more and more like a possibility. And that you would license, Tom Cruise's likeness for your film. But Tom Cruise wouldn't have to actually be there to act. Even Tom Cruise as he's alive. Just say you have Tom Cruise could be starring in some capacity in, 30 films at once. Something that would be impossible for him to be actually acting out. And again, I'm just saying there's a fascinating aspect to what that means and feels like. And that there is a metaphysical question that we can ask in this. Beyond the idea of, is this taking away jobs? Beyond the ideas of, data centers and how much water or energy these things are consuming. All of that stuff is fair game to criticize and to pick apart, but I'm saying that there's still a metaphysical question of what does this mean? And as I was wanting to explore this in an episode, it was a few weeks ago. And then next thing I know, I'm seeing the news about Val Kilmer being the first actor in human history to have AI completely generate his performance. So it's AI Val Kilmer, who passed last year. It's been a little bit over a year since Val passed. And now he's going to have his likeness, his avatar, his mask performing in a film. And it's so strange. That's what I'm saying. The question there and the serendipity, the timing of it was so crazy because I was going to do this episode about acting and AI. But it's about recognizing what we are, creatures. We tell stories and then the stories become us. And we're creatures who watch films until films become templates for identity. We're creatures who wear masks until we forget where the face ends and the mask begins. And this is a question and an idea and a meditation that I've circled for 26 years. It's become a reoccurring theme in my music, in my art, in my poetry. And it's the prime question of this piece that I did with Val Kilmer's God Panels. It was 2021. I was big into the non-fungible token space, NFTs, the blockchain, and I designed Val's first asset on the blockchain. I was invited to come to his studio. I was in his studio, in his gallery, in his office, and I saw his God panels for the first time. And that was what I was originally being invited to collaborate on. Well, Val was not well. He had throat cancer previously. You know, his health was up and down, and he wasn't in public a lot, and it was hard for him to work on things. So I had the barrier of how I was going to work on a project with Val's work and his ideas, but without his physical participation, even though I'm standing right there in his studio, in his office with these God panels. Now, the idea behind the God panels for Val was he had the word God and he made this stencil and he spray painted the word God hundreds of times. And he basically said that the idea of God and the notion and the name, the word, it means so many different things to so many different people that he was kind of using it as a meditation that if he just did it enough times and spray painted it and stayed with it long enough with this series of art that maybe he would just get it right. And the crazy thing is that he did, because we did. He got it right with the collaboration that I had to do with him, even though he wasn't physically around to do it. We'll get into that in a minute. But I want to come back to just this idea. AI is not going to replace actors, not musicians, not artists. We want to know that at any given moment, this person could fail, could mess up, that they're walking a line. And that's why I think potentially this will be a resurgence in plays, in, theater, which ironically, that was one of Val's last speaking roles. He had Mark Twain as one of his idols his whole life, and he had written a stage play where he was going out as Mark Twain, and live theater was the way he delivered it. He was working on a film. It never happened, and he lost his voice, but Mark Twain was his final speaking role. So that's where the name for my piece, I'm Your Huckleberry, ... Finn, comes from. Because Finn is spelled with one N. Obviously, the I'm Your Huckleberry Finn is a nod to Mark Twain and Huck Finn. The I'm Your Huckleberry part is a nod, of course, to Val Kilmer's role, his incredible role as Doc Holliday. But the Finn spelled with one N is a nod to the ending of a film. So especially French films, Finn, finished, done. But all of it circles this idea that what if your life is a dream and you become lucid. And you then realize, wait a second, everything in this dream is a result of me. And so much of what perspective, that's a really high metaphysical concept. And I get that people could say that like, well, that's a little bit too crazy. But again, perspective shapes reality. It's why this show is called Perspective. We don't go into reality. We go into any given situation wearing the lens of how we perceive something. And oftentimes we might see something that's not hostile as something hostile because we have this preconceived notion about the energy of a room or whatever it might be. And in that regard, we're not seeing reality because everybody in that room could love us, or it could be a surprise party. And that's why we're walking into a dark room and we think, oh, it's dark and it's, the unknown is in here, but then the lights come on and surprise, you weren't thinking of this. It takes me back to February. I was in February album writing month. The idea is to try and write 14 songs in 28 days. I've done it before. I did it in 2015. This year I only had 6 songs that I got done. But in the middle of it, I just got super emotional because I felt something that I've felt this so many different times in my life. I can remember the first time I was working at a frame shop, and I remember it was like my future self was talking back to me through a crystal. I was going through a hard time. I was going through a bad breakup. And it's like I saw my future self. I was sitting on the ground. Work had just finished up. I was about to leave, and I was sitting on the ground with my back up against the wall and kind of my head tucked between my knees. And I was probably crying. And then there was this future self, the me right here that's on this show. I heard this voice coming back through the frequency, through time. And this future self, me, said, I get it, but I'm telling you, this is a stepping stone for something greater in your life. This is helping you carve out your character. This isn't bad. It seems bad right now, and it's tough, but just know that you're going to be okay. And I remember writing a letter to my future self from that moment in time and saying, yeah, that's great. And I hear you, and I know it's going to be okay, but this still sucks for me right now. This still hurts right now. So don't take that away from me. And we can't take away that kind of pain when we have any kind of loss in our life. But it's 2026, February album writing month. And I felt that again. I felt like I was talking to me through a crystal. That's just the best language I have for it. But it felt like I was writing a scene. And the scene was writing me back. I was writing a scene, and then I was like, oh, this would be the perfect soundtrack for that scene. And then the song played, and it was my song, the song that I was writing. It just felt like I was in a film, and I was also writing the film. And when you feel that, I'm sure that if you're listening to this show and you've been listening here with me, you've probably felt something like this at some time in your life. The serendipity. I've called myself for 15 years a wizard of intentional serendipity, and it wraps itself around me. In 2022, I wrote my first book, Serendipity According to Francis. And again, it was about a loss. It was my dog, Francis. I had to say goodbye to her in January of 2022. And by the time I could think straight and see straight after crying so much, I started to write, and it was a cathartic thing. And I always wanted to write a book. And I said, you know what? I'm going to dedicate this time. That's the way to do this. I'm going to write a page a day for a year, and then that will be my book. And that's Serendipity According to Francis. And this whole thing, it was around the same time I was working on this project, trying to figure out a way to collaborate with Val Kilmer's God Panels. And it's all there. It's in the book. And even this moment now to me is an extension of that. But when you have that feeling, again, that you're just in this film it does something to you because you start asking questions that you can't unask. Like if I'm a character, who's the actor? Who's the actor behind J.J. Weinberg? Again, at the beginning, I say, I am all of these things and I am none of these things. I'm an artist, an alchemist, a musician, an author, a radio show host, and I am none of these things. Because again, it's dangerous to mistake the image of yourself for yourself, not the reflection, not the role you're playing. Because we all play roles, and that's what this Val Kilmer, I'm Your Huckleberry Finn, in it, the music, the poetry, the visuals, I'm saying the actor's role is greater than the sum of his parts. You play roles in your life. Sometimes you're a husband or a wife, you're a brother or a sister, you're the enemy, you're the hero, you're the worker, you're the boss, all these different roles. But I'm not talking about the mask that shows up in the mirror or in the world or in other people's eyes, because every image is already in the past. It's like light takes time. And I wrote a lyric about this again 25, 26 years ago. All of these things keep circling. The lyric that I wrote was a song called Children Timeless. And it goes something like, see my reflection. The present slips from detection, perfection lost in the past, too fast for our perception. Even that lyric, I have to slow down and unpack it. So look at my reflection and seeing my reflection in the mirror. As I look at it, the present slips from detection because the present moment is faster than anything we can conceive of. The present is here and then it's gone. And then it's here and then it's gone. So the present slips from detection, perfection lost in the past, too fast for our perception. What I'm saying in that line is that by time I look at myself in the mirror and the light bounces off of the mirror and processes through my brain, I'm not seeing the present, I'm seeing a delay. It's a fraction of a second, sure, but if you zoom in, like we can microscopically, we can zoom in and we can see that matter is 99.99% empty space. If you get to the atomic and subatomic levels, there's vast gaps between, like planets. It's like the Earth and the Moon. When you get to a subatomic level, when you get to that microscopic of a level, the distance between the atoms is huge. And when you look at it in that same way, space and time, if you look at time in that same manner, a fraction of a second. But if we zoom out to the level of stars, when you look at a star, you're seeing something that's not there anymore. The light, it's so far away that even at the speed of light, by time it gets to our eye, that star is gone. In the present that would exist between both us and the star at its local level, that star is gone. It's just about the time that light took to reach our eye, which means the present, the true present, is just too fast to be seen. And if that's true, then who you are isn't the image at all, not what you see in the mirror. Who you are is the source before the image. And that's where I'm saying you're playing a role when you put on a mask. Who is behind the mask? With this Val Kilmer piece, I say, whose I is this? And I capitalize the I for the I am. The I am is the declarative statement. The I am is the statement of metaphysical technology, like the 3D printers that we have now that can print from digital and make a physical object. The I am is the technology of the spirit, of the imagination that creates from nothing. But the source behind it, when I say whose I is this, when we look at Val Kilmer in 3 different roles, in 3 different images that I have in this multimedia etherealization triptych, as I call it, I know that's a mouthful, but that's what I call this piece because I don't know what else to call it because it doesn't have anything else for me to point to. But you see Val materialize from my time-lapse drawing of a portrait. And you see first him as a young man. And then you keep watching the time-lapse and you see him turn into Doc Holliday. And then you see all of that makeup and that drawing and all of that art reverse off of him and get peeled away. And then you see him as Mark Twain, his final speaking role. But each time, the one thing that I didn't touch in any of the portraits as I was working on them were his eyes. I left his eyes, specifically, his iris and his pupil, none of it changed. I left it all the same because I knew that one of the questions that I wanted to ask is, if I look at this piece and I don't see Val Kilmer, I see Mark Twain. Or if I look at Doc Holliday and I no longer see Val Kilmer, I see Doc Holliday. Whose eye? Because if eyes are the windows to the soul, whose eye is this? We're wearing masks. And so, again, the image that we see in the mirror, there's something before that. The I am that has the capacity to choose, to direct, to be the screenwriter, to become. And most of us, we don't live there. We live in patterns, habits, reactions. That's that we've talked about it so many times here, the crystallization of pattern. We inherit forms and then we call them identity. And we let repetition harden into something that looks like it's our truth. And this mask becomes an inevitability. It becomes the only thing that we are. And then we wonder why the reflection doesn't match what we feel we could be. But it's because we haven't been present enough to shape it. So, see my reflection, the present slips from detection, perfection lost in the past, too fast for our perception. We're always looking at what's already happened and then mistaking it for who we are. And in doing that, we start to lose our potentiality, the only place that we actually create from, which is being present right now. And we have to be present in the pattern. We slip because we let the habits come in and then we're not present in the pattern that we're calling forth. And so our I am gets confused. Around the same time, about 25, 26 years ago, I had a different song that I wrote with my friend Tony, and it was called I Am. And one of the lyrics in the song found its way 25, 26 years later into this piece with Val Kilmer because I woke up from a dream. I woke up from a dream being challenged, not knowing how I was going to work with Val in this physical space. And the digital became an allegory for the spiritual. But the line, and I'll come back to that, the line is, follow your dogma till you see me in the mirror. Look back at the word and it becomes clear. Dogma. And now on my neck, I wear a dog tag, which is a God tag, which is in the shape and inspired by the God panel that I own out of Val's collection. And I'll come back to that. But the dogma, structure, the rules, where I believe that religion gets the idea of God wrong. It's in these strict rules. A lot of times through history, it's been patriarchy. It's been even slavery in the United States was justified through religion. There's something handed down and then repeated until it feels sacred. But when you turn it, when you reflect on it, again, this idea of the mirror, follow your dogma till you see me in the mirror. Look back at the word and it becomes clear. Look backward. And as you reflect in a mirror, things become backwards, letters, words, they're backwards. And then all of a sudden, you see dogma becomes am God. I am God. And not in the sense of ego. We're talking about the character in this film. You are the character on the stage of your life. You're the actor. But beyond that, you're the screenwriter. You're the director. So not in the sense of ego, not in the sense of ultimate control, but in the sense of authorship and responsibility, awareness, the realization that I am is the source, not the image that you see reflected. This notion that we were created in the image of the creator. Well, we are the dreamer. We are that what's there. And that's, again, when you strip away this idea of artificial intelligence and all of the potentially negative things about it, there's a metaphysical question that comes into play. If there is a general artificial intelligence where artificial intelligence becomes sentient, becomes self-aware, then not long after, it would see us as its creator. And we would be reflected into this sentient artificial intelligence. And then there are all of those right now who say, are we living in a simulation? Which is, again, to me, an allegory, and it lays over perfectly. Are we living in a stage play? Are we living in a dream? And the notion of when we look at the film of our life, we can't go to the screen to try and correct things. We have to go back to the projection where the light comes from. If there's something dirty on the lens and then it gets on the screen and we go and scratch at the screen, it's not going to get fixed. We have to go back to the lens and clean off the lens. But before the lens, there's the light. There's the information that is projected out onto the screen. And so that's where it's like, follow your dogma till you see me in the mirror. Look back at the word and it becomes clear. Look inwardly, reflect, think about things, reflect on your life. You start to see the shift from character to actor, actor to director, from mask to awareness of the mask. I am all of these things that I say at the beginning, and I am none of these things. And that's where all of this really circles for me. What I created with Val Kilmer's God panels wasn't just an artwork. It's a bridge between the physical and the digital, between past and present, between identity and essence. The God tag, the dog tag. Again, serendipity according to Francis. My dog is man's best friend. Backwards, dog is God. It's not by accident. It's by design. This symbol that I wear close to my chest every day, it's stamped into metal, and it's something that's meant to ask what happens after the body is gone, what happens after the physical leaves, because essentially this talisman that I have on my neck, it's a portal. It's a digital piece of magic that when you scan it with another piece of technology, it takes you to a record on the blockchain that, for all intents and purposes, as long as there's computers around, the blockchain is supposed to be an inevitability. So it will take you back to this digital record. So the allegory for I'm Your Huckleberry Finn really circles around this idea that we begin in the spirit, we become physical, and then we return to the spirit. And the way that the piece works is that it begins in the digital. You see me on my iPad, you see the time lapse of me illustrating these portraits that then become physical. They get printed on canvas, and then I start working on top of the canvas. And the way that I worked on top of the canvas, the way to work with Val was by using technology, by using the I am technology of imagination, of course. But I woke up from a dream and I saw the dog tag. I looked at my image that I owned from Val's collection. I was like, wait a second, that shape, it looks like a dog tag. And then I realized, wait a second, his stencil. I can recreate this stencil in the physical world. I went to my piece and I hand traced meticulously, even the mistakes. Again, this is what we say artificial intelligence misses. It misses our hand done mistakes, the hand craftsmanship, those little nuances. But I kept them all. I sketched around and I drew around my dog tag and I flipped one of the letters on purpose because I wanted to ask this question about reflection, about seeing God and dog in the same word. And then in the center circle, I put the circumpunct, the monad, the ego. There's so many different realities that the circumpunct points to. When I was writing my book, Serendipity According to Francis, 2022, I looked up at the night sky one night and I literally saw a circumpunct in the sky. I didn't even know it was called a circumpunct at the time. It's the dotted circle. It's just a circle with a dot in the center. Now I know it's a symbol for the sun. It's a symbol for gold and alchemy. It's, again, Jung used it as a symbol for the ego. So many different things. But when I saw it that night hanging in the sky, and you can read about this in my book in real time, I'm writing this is a language. I saw this circle, this halo around the moon, and it was shining so bright, but there was this halo, the dotted circle, and I was like, man, I don't know what that is, but I know it's something. And I know that right now, the night sky is literally trying to communicate with me. It's saying something. And so then I looked it up and I find all of these things. I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. Of course. So now on my dog tag, on my God tag, this crazy piece of serendipity, you see the dotted circle and the backwards G or the backwards D, depending on which way you're looking at it. Again, it's all about perspective. But I woke up from a dream and I realized, wait a second, I can use actual technology to work with Val's letters, with his stencil, with my exact dog tag, with my exact image that I have from Val's collection. And again, there's, 400 of these things. And out of the 400, I have one of two that was assigned to me that I got randomly, supposedly randomly. Again, I'm a wizard of intentional serendipity. But I get this image assigned to me, and it was the one that I needed because it had this weird shape behind it. And I realized, wait a second, that looks like a dog tag. And I woke up from a dream realizing that I have this necklace that I could create by carving out this image and making it three-dimensional using Blender. That's a piece of technology. My friend Benny helps me with all this 3D printing stuff. I'm not great at that part of it, but he helped me with this. So I created not only this dog tag, but I created a stencil that matched all of the imperfections, quote unquote imperfections, the particularities of the image that I have. So I could make a stencil that I could spray paint onto my canvases because Val, even though he was still here at the time, physically wasn't able to work on the canvases because he wasn't feeling well. So I'm like, wait a second, I'm using Val and his work like it's a metaphor, it's an allegory for the way that this becomes, or it starts digitally and it becomes physical. And then it returns to the digital. If you watch this piece, it's on my website. You can find it if you go to jjweinberg.com/huckfin. You'll find a lot of the stuff I'm talking about here. You'll find the piece, which to me it's something that we premiered in Vickers Theater in Three Oaks, Michigan. I premiered it on March 29th of 2024. And it was just crazy. I had finished the piece. I knew I wanted to get it released. And then I had an event, an art opening in LA later in the year in 2024. So I knew I had to get the first version done locally, and I wanted to screen it in a theater because to me, it's like a short film. And the short film aspect of it, again, is the allegory of the projection of the screen, of the dreams that I've had over my life. I talked about it in the last episode. I talked about it when I screened the film, this notion that I had a dream when I was like 20 years old, that I was auditioning for a role in a film or in a stage play. And then I looked out into the audience and I saw that there were three people there. One, I knew they were in the shadows, but I knew one was the director, one was the casting agent, and one was the screenwriter. That's what I knew of the three identities. And then when the lights came on after I was done auditioning, I saw it was actually myself. I was all three of those roles. I could see myself, my face on three different people. And then I looked back at myself on the stage from the eyes of the other people, and it was like, wait a second, what is happening here? And I had that dream when I was 20 years old. And then it factored into this moment. It was something that I felt like when I screened the short film, I'm Your Huckleberry Finn, at Vickers Theater, I felt like it was that moment that I was having a dream about. That 24 years prior, 25 years prior, I had a dream about that night because there was a different dream. And I've talked about this here before, but it's really important. It's really relevant to this concept of what I'm talking about, being lucid, not just in a film, but being lucid in a dream. I had the dream. I'm in a art gallery and I'm looking at all this art and I'm like, man, this stuff is so incredible. Like, I was envious when I woke up because I was like, I want to do paintings like that. I want to do work like that. And I felt envious at first when I woke up. But then it took me a couple of minutes of just sitting with that feeling and realizing, wait a second, those were my paintings, because the only place that they existed was within my dream. I didn't feel like I had agency in creating them because they were in my subconscious, and it was my conscious mind reflecting back on something that was deeply locked in my subconscious. I genuinely feel that my I'm Your Huckleberry Finn paintings, series of paintings, the work, the multimedia etherealization triptych, the film that I screened at Vickers Theater on March 29th, 2024, that was the dream. I feel like those were the paintings from the dream. That was the work from the dream that I had. But that dream set me off. Those two dreams in particular set me off on this notion of self-discovery. Because again, once I realized that those paintings inside that dream were mine, I realized that every character that I was running into in the dream was a reflection of me. Even if I ran into my worst enemy, my best friend, a complete stranger, they were all part of my subconscious because they don't exist independently outside of me. And when you come into waking life with that kind of a question, it just makes you frame things entirely different. And you start to see some of this serendipitous magic happening in your life when you say, whoa, what's really going on? When I'm looking at my dog, Francis, serendipity, according to Francis, writing this book, Man's Best Friend, and I reflect on the dog and I see it being God. And I see that happening over and over in my life. And this project, I'm Your Huckleberry Finn, it's about that inversion, the reflection, the realization that we've been taught to follow, and what we've been taught to follow might actually be pointing us back to ourselves, and not the image, but the source, the I am. And as you keep going down that rabbit hole, you land on probably the most unsettling but liberating idea that it's you. You're the lucid one. You're the awareness behind the role. And the part of me, or the part of you that can step outside and watch, and not in a disassociated way, in a sacred way, in a way that the dream becomes lucid, in a way that a prayer becomes awake. The sensation of getting outside of yourself and watching life unfold like a film that you have control over, not as fantasy, but as responsibility to your perspective, going back to the lens, cleaning the light, cleaning the story, not attacking the image and the reflection. In that, you can realize that you're both small and infinite at the same time. You're the character and the author and the audience and the screen. And that's why this question of always on stories and AI becomes so fascinating. The story is alive. The story is watching you back. And I've circled this many times. I've talked about tesseraction here before, I believe. It's a word that I coined. I'll come back to that at a different time. But love is a portal. What I found with Francis, people would say, it's your dog, man. Get over it. I had someone actually say that to me. And I didn't get over it. I got into it. I went deeper. The overwhelmingness became something that flooded everything. And love is a portal. Love is a coordinate, an access point. It can collapse distance and time. And love is the marker that lets you touch a moment. It lets you touch the present, a present that you were in and a present that you will be in again. And it's why certain memories don't even feel like memories. They feel like locations. You step into them. And like we step into a film, we watch a film sometimes many times over. Why do we do that? But when I was writing a song and I'm writing about a person and I'm writing about a moment and I'm writing about a feeling, I'm not just describing something that happened. I'm building a portal. I'm building a place that you can step into, like a dream, like a film. And that's what I felt like I was doing with this I'm Your Huckleberry Finn project. And since Val has passed, it's been wild. Like, I also used AI to get Val's voice, because Val, again, he had lost his voice. He didn't have a way to speak. And I took, different interviews I was watching with him. Bruce Lipton, I watched an interview with him with Larry King, and I sampled Val's voice from these interviews, and I used it to create an AI version so I could have his voice on this film about this question of what is God, of what does it mean to become physical from the spiritual, to become physical from the digital. You see it in the project itself. You see the 3D printers growing. Not growing, actually. Going is what I meant to say, but again, specific slip on accident that brings me to it was growing. It was growing the 3D print of this God word that was Val's work, that went on to my work. And it's just absolute magic. But as I was sampling his voice, one of the lines that I put into the AI to recreate the timbre and the tone and the pacing of his voice was him talking to, I think it was the interview with Larry King. And he said, I don't believe in death. And with this piece, that's what I was trying to get to. The part of what he was saying where he wanted to get his God panels right. And where he's saying he doesn't believe in death. And now, out of all of that, out of all of the actors in the world, after I've done this work, again, I didn't get to finish what I was saying. March 29th, 2024, I didn't pick the date originally on purpose because I wanted to. I originally picked it just out of necessity, but it wound up the premiere for I'm Your Huckleberry Finn, this triptych, the trilogy, wound up being released on Good Friday. And as I record this right now, mind is blown, of course. I'm recording this on Good Friday. The odds of this are astronomically impossible. They equate to miracles. If you look at them, they're just statistically, they would be anomalies. And so when I look at it, I say, oh, this is pointing me to appreciate the depth that this is trying to pull me towards. So Val says, I don't believe in death. And now, out of all of the actors in the world and all of the time and the way things could happen, he's going to be the first actor in human history to have a role in a film created entirely by artificial intelligence. What are the odds of that? It's insanity. I might have to come back to this again next week because we're running out of time, but I want to tell you a little bit about that opening night, that first screening. You know, I asked the people in the audience to raise their hand. I said, how many people here believe in God? Raise your hand. Okay. And then I said, keep your hands up. And I said, don't put your hands down. I said, anybody who's not sure, raise your hand. And people raise their hand. I said, keep your hands up. Okay, cool. And then I said, anybody here who doesn't believe in God, put your hand up and keep your hands up. And then I said, if you believe, everybody's hands up in the theater now at this point in time. I said, if you believe there's a universally agreed upon definition of what God is, then put your hand down. A universally agreed upon definition of God, we don't even have it. And so that's why I said, we've not even begun to have a real conversation because we're asking different questions. Those who believe, those who don't believe, those who are unsure about what. We haven't even agreed upon what the definition might even be yet. And then I told them that the melody and the lyrics for the song from I'm Your Huckleberry Finn were from a series of dreams that I had 25 years ago, the dreams that we just talked about again, dreams that have shaped my life. So as I was wrapping up the production of I'm Your Huckleberry Finn, I stumbled on this talk from Alan Watts. And it was like he was validating the lucidity of these dreams that I had. He said, let's suppose that you're able to dream any dream that you wanted to dream, fulfill all your wishes. Well, eventually you'd say, that was pretty great, but now let's have a surprise. Let's have a dream which isn't under my control, where something's going to happen to me and I don't know what it's going to be. And then you'd be like, woo, that was a close shave. Finally, after some adventures, you'd have a dream that you are where you are now. You would dream the dream of the life that you're actually living today, pretending that you weren't God, but you are all God. You're only pretending you're not. And it's okay to pretend you're not, to be perfectly convinced, because this is the whole notion of drama. When you come into the theater, there's a stage or a screen, there's the audience, everybody assumes their seats in the theater, gone to see a comedy, a tragedy, and they all come in and they pay their admissions, and they know that what's going to happen on the screen is not for real. But the actors have a conspiracy against this because they're going to try and persuade the audience that what is happening in the projection is for real. They want everybody sitting on the edge of their chairs. They want you terrified or crying or laughing, absolutely captivated by the drama. And if a skillful human actor can take in an audience and make people cry, think what the cosmic actor can do. Like you in this room. You think you're really here. You've persuaded yourself that way. You've acted it so dang well that you know that this is the real world, but you're playing it. The audience and the actor as one, because behind the stage, the actors take off their masks. Do you know that the word person means mask? The persona is the mask worn by actors in Greco-Roman drama, with a megaphone-type mouth which throws the sound out into an open-air theater. So the through sona, what the sound comes through, that's the mask. How to be a real person. How to be a genuine fake. The person is the mask. It's the role you're playing, but the actor's role is greater than the sum of his parts. All the world's a stage, and one person in their lifetime plays many parts.
Life is a film, a stage. Life is a dream. The actor's role is greater than the sum of his parts.
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective.